Sweet. Hello, Nikki. Glad to
Hello.
have you. Hello. All right. I am really excited to hear about what you're working on now. So please tell me a bit about that.
Wow.
Who
Okay.
you are.
So, yeah. So I've been really lucky over the last, I'll say 10 to 12 years of my career, like working in operations to meet some like really cool people who are doing amazing things. And something I was really lucky to do over the last few years is be able to work with those people in a lot of different capacities to help them kind of bring their dream and vision to life by supporting it with my, I'll call it operational know-how. And it got to the point where I just liked everybody I was working with so much that I decided that I was going to go do that on my own. So I've opened up my own consulting firm to basically work with, visionary, creative entrepreneurs who have something to bring to the world and they want to change it, but they might just be missing that one little foundational piece or one part of their playbook to truly take their impact and their vision to a bigger audience. And then that's where I come in and kind of 1, 2, 3, give them what they got to do, and then
Got it. Got it. And for people such as myself who aren't completely clear on what operations is, like how would
Mhm.
you define operations?
Operations, I would kind of at a very high level break down into people, process, and planning. So anything related to your team, building a team, HR, hiring, performance improvement plans, onboarding, like how do you get your team to a point where they're just like working in their lanes and doing amazing things? And then process. So all of the nuts and bolts of your business, like what happens on a day-to-day basis and how can you really up level optimize what you're doing so that you can have your time back and things can
Mm,
run much more efficiently. And then planning, what is the vision for your company and how can you take a dream that you have or an idea that you have and turn it into something that has some guardrails, has some framework behind it, that you can actually like measure progress on. And 6 months
mm.
from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, you can look back and say, okay, yes, like my path was defined enough for me to follow it, but I still got to be me while I
Yes.
was doing it.
I love that.
Mhm.
And so who is your kind of ideal because it's funny because I feel like if we're thinking of, visionary entrepreneurs, I feel like
Mhm.
these tend to be the kind of people who are the big picture thinkers who maybe
Mhm.
don't have the systems and nuts and bolts. Is that kind of what this is about?
Yeah, 'cause something I definitely learned over the last few years working quite hand in hand with visionaries is they're really good at figuring out who their avatar is. They're amazing at figuring out the change, the transformation they want to give to their clients. And they love the relationship part of their business. They love the conversations. They love the work that they can do. They love chatting, having the events and having these experiences that are they've got proof of concept in what they're doing. They know that it's working. But where a lot of them, I think, start to run into roadblocks is the idea of what's next or how can I do this better or more efficiently? How can I deliver even more results where I'm not having to work, 80 hours a week, or
Hmm.
I want to start bringing in a team member. How do I, still be in my genius and still get to do what I love and then offload or delegate the things that I don't really love or I'm not as good at.
Cool. And I definitely get a feeling like this is very much your genius zone.
Mhm.
So tell me a bit about like how did you kind of discover that for yourself and how did you get into this area? Like how did that become clear to you over time that this was your thing that you can
Yeah,
offer people?
it's really interesting. Like I've been really lucky, in the last like 15 years that I've been working that I've worked in multiple industries. And
Mm,
honestly, I credit probably the first time I really kind of got into this idea was my first job when I turned 16 was I worked at McDonald's. And I did that for a number of years. I became like a shift manager when I was a teenager because you always have to manage, customer service, client facing things. But at the same time, you're on your headset in the drive through and you're taking money, you're taking orders, you're restocking things, you're making sure the store is clean. So that was kind of my first foray into being able to juggle and like anticipate things. And from there, I started working in supply chain procurement
mhm,
logistics. I worked overseas, bringing oranges from Africa
mhm.
to, grocery
Pineapple
stores.
trucks.
Oh, but the pineapple truck, that's kind of what I started was in produce and supply chain. And then from there, it's when you're working with perishables, you're always having to juggle things.
Yeah.
So it's, what's the team? What are the logistics? I have to talk to the government. I have to talk to customers. I have to talk to warehouse people. And, you always have to manage things and preempt things very quickly. But I was also an actor, and I worked in theater for a while through
Yes.
from a very young age through university. So it's working with creative personalities and bringing visions to life, but also having to manage a budget and build sets and create shift schedules and make sure that when the curtain goes up, there's something there for people to look at. So I think it's been a variety of things
Got it.
that have kind of come together to create this.
So it's like taking the big vision down to like, if here's where we want to go in the future, like what do we actually do next? And like, what are the systems that we can do day to day that will like actually move us forward to that goal, which is really, that's I think a huge stumbling block for people is how do you actually translate that into bite-sized pieces?
Exactly.
So for anyone watching, like maybe if you're struggling with this for yourself, what are a couple ways that you can get started to think about this in your own life and business?
Excellent question. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to action. I was talking to a friend last week and he reminded me of this quote, and I cannot remember who said it, but the idea is that if information was all we needed, we'd all be billionaires with six packs. Yes. Right? Like magazines have not changed very much. The concepts of business don't change. The concepts of what works doesn't change. It can be repackaged and, talked about with different language, but at the end of the day, we all know what works. But what has to happen is you actually have to do something, right? This idea of action and taking action, but how do you take smart action? So I think one of the things I work a lot with people on right now is, you're a visionary and that's amazing. You have this idea, you have this concept, you have a way you like to work with clients. So let's think about what you actually want your lifestyle to look like in a few years.
Yes.
Like, how do you want to interact with your team? What impact do you want to be creating? Like, let's get future focused. Let's really bring that idea to life of what you want to do. Then let's look at where you are now and think of what are you missing? What are the opportunities? What are the things you need? And then let's actually, create that list of here's what I'm actually going to do and put it into action. I think a lot of people get, shiny coin syndrome. There's always something new out there. There's always something, I want to try that, but it might not be relevant to you, or you might not know how to translate that information into what you need. So that's kind of what I do. I kind of joke that I translate visionary into action and back again.
Cool. I love that. And tell me a bit about, I saw you had a post about like you're treating your calendar as sacred. And I think it's so easy for people to be like, I'm a creative, things will just like happen when and I think I relate to you because I identify as being like left and right brain together. And I feel like I have a pet peeve of when people are like waiting until they're inspired to do something. And that I feel like is not always useful. So tell me a bit about like treating your calendar as something sacred.
One of the things I definitely find with, and this is not, I'd say only with visionaries, I definitely find it myself, but I'll say with business owners in mind, is that when you wear so many hats, it is hard to kind of take control of your time or manage your time because there's, I have to manage sales and then there's marketing and then I have to talk to my clients and I have to do my billings for the month and there's invoicing. There's all these things that it can kind of get overwhelming. And there's so many studies now that say like multitasking isn't super effective because the idea of switching tasks actually takes up more energy than performing the task.
Yes.
But at the same time, when you're starting out, you can, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but you can be in a place where you want to accept every opportunity that comes your way. Every email that you get that says, hey, let's talk, you're like, yes, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take these opportunities. And you just kind of start to get overwhelmed because all of a sudden, you're doing 12 different things in a day and some things are falling off. Like you haven't talked to a client in a few days and you're like, crap, like customer service, that's not good. Or you're like, I haven't updated my social media in a week. This is bad.
Yeah.
So you do have to be inspired, I think, when things come to you, right? Like that's the genius of being a business owner, that if you're privileged enough to be able to kind of take control of your own destiny in that way, there's some responsibility that's going to have to come with it of how do I manage this? So one of the things, and again, this is not a new concept. Strategic coach talks about this in a few different ways. A former boss of mine, John Goodman at the PTC, he talks about this strategy for trainers. You can call it time blocking, you can call it theme days, whatever you want to call it. The concept remains. Figure out what works for you in terms of, when do you like to work creatively? When do you like to do admin work? Do you want to be doing sales calls? Do you like working with your teams? When do you want self-care time? and think of that first and put some guidelines in. This doesn't mean you're going to be scheduling your whole day 24/7, because that can be counterintuitive and that can almost feel super, super restrictive. But the idea that think of your boundaries and your needs, whatever you want to call the bare minimum that you will accept for how you live and work, put those in first. You know, like for me, for example, I won't take calls on Fridays. Like I will never, unless it's like a complete emergency or there's a special occasion, I will never take a call on Friday, because that is my day where I work to catch up on the week. It's an admin day for me, but it's also like Fridays, I'm super creative. So I'll probably film 5 or 6 videos on Fridays and just kind of get it out. I also know that I'm not a morning person, so I won't take calls before 10 a.m. because I like to have my morning routine. I like to hang out with my dog. I do, you know, my planning, my meditation, all this stuff. So like I will never take a meeting before 10 a.m. So I kind of put in these blocks, these parameters, these guardrails that I know best serve me. And it is hard. It can be very hard to kind of start with that. I had a really good friend of mine reach out and says, hey, I really want to talk to you about, you know, working with you. And I had to send him my calendar link because I've set up my calendar for these boundaries, and he couldn't get a free time until I think it's like next Tuesday or Wednesday. And he's like, okay, I've booked it, but let me know if something opens up. And I'm like, I could take him on Friday, but no, like,
yes, you have to keep,
I have to honor myself and the decisions I've made.
Because it's so easy to negotiate with when it's yourself.
Exactly.
It's not like you're talking to an employee. Like when your employee is kind of yourself, it makes it a little bit more, you can start to negotiate with
100%. But the great thing is too, that saying no can be really hard for people. I definitely still struggle with it from time to time. So, but if you have created these guardrails and a way to kind of gatekeep your time, whether that's through a booking link or an admin or what have you, it's not so much you're saying no, it's this is how I'm going to honor myself, my time, my energy. It's not about you, and it's not about me saying, Dan, I don't want to talk to you. Like I'll talk to you next week. It's more, this is my system, this is my process, this is how I work. And I think people understand that.
Perfect.
And easy thing to use.
And before we wrap up here, I have to ask, what would you say you most need help with right now?
I'd say twofold. One of which is I love to know how people want to learn about this type of thing. And I'll operations, right? Like, what is the way that information like this can be best presented? What is the way that makes the most sense? Because again, going back to this idea that information is everywhere. You know, none of this is new. It's repackaged. It's, you know, reworded. But what makes the most sense? Because how I like to work is not typically how I would say visionary business owners like to work, right? So I'm always interested in seeing how people absorb information and then take the information and then turn it into action plans. So even if it's just kind of contextual or like just stories like, oh, I love to go to events and learn these things. I wish it was a book. I wish it was a course. Like I'm always interested in people's learning styles around that, to kind of then say, okay, great. Here's how I can kind of better serve people if I can kind of meet them where they are, but at the same time, kind of bring them up on my back if it takes that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for this time together. I can't wait to share this. And please tell me, where can people find you online and how can they get in touch?
You can reach out to me at McKnightoc.com. That's MCKNIGA. It's McKnight Operational Consulting, which is where I kind of funnel everything through. So you can learn a little bit more about me, the types of things that I do. I do a lot of one-on-one done for you services is kind of my preliminary focus. But at the end of the day, I like doing cool stuff with cool people.
Cool.
So if there's like a fun project or something custom out there, I love those.
Cool. Well,
that's why I do what I do.
This has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time and be in touch. Thanks, Nikki. Take care. Bye.